4d. Though, as the Apostle says, the Gentiles without the law do by nature the things contained in the law, and are a law to themselves, which show the work of the law written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness, and their thoughts, the meanwhile accusing or else excusing one another. Romans 2:14-15. And so have some notion of the difference between moral good and evil. Yet this is not so clear and extensive, but the same of the greatest moralists among them give unto the most notorious vices, and allow of them, and recommended them. Chrysippus allowed of incest. Plato commended community of wives. Socrates a plurality of wives, and which he enforced by his own example. Cicero pleaded for fornication. The Stoics, a grave set of moralists, for the use of obscene words, and recommended suicide as becoming a wise man, and as his duty to commit in some cases. So dim was this light of nature in things of a moral kind. 4c. Though in many cases reason taught them that certain vices were disagreeable to God and resented by him, and he was displeased with them and would punish for it, and they were very desirous of appeasing him, but then how to reconcile himself to them and recommend themselves to his favour, they were quite ignorant, and therefore took the most shocking and detestable methods for it, as human sacrifices, and particularly burning their innocent infants. But Revelation shows us the more excellent way. 4f. Men may by the light of nature have some notion of sin as an offence to God, and of their need of forgiveness from him, and from a general notion of his mercy, and of some instances of kindness to them, may entertain some faint hope of pardon for it, but then they cannot be certain of it from thence, or that even God will pardon sin at all, the sins of any man, and still less how this can be done consistent with his holiness and justice. But through divine revelation we come to a clear and certain knowledge of this doctrine and of its consistence with the divine perfections. 4g. The light of nature leaves men entirely without the knowledge of the way of salvation by the Son of God, and even without revelation, angels of themselves would not be able to know the way of salvation, nor the way of saving sinful man, or how sinful man can be justified before God. Wherefore, in order to know this, they desire to look into it. 1 Peter 1:12. Some have thought that Socrates had some notion of it, who is made to say, "It is necessary to wait till someone teaches how to behave towards God and men." But then this respects only a man's outward conduct and not of his salvation. Nor does the philosopher seem to have any clear notion of the instructor he should use to instruct, and still less of the certainty of his coming. And besides, the relator of this, Plato, might receive this as a tradition from the East, where it is well known he travelled for knowledge. But the divine revelation gives an account of this glorious person, not merely as an instructor of men in the way of their duty, but as a saviour of them from their sins, and in what way he has wrought out salvation by his sacrifice, blood, and righteousness. 4h. The light of nature is far from giving any clear and certain account of the immortality of the soul, the resurrection of the body, and a future state of happiness and misery. As for the immortality of the soul, the heathens rather wished it be true than they were fully satisfied of it, that they were for it made use of but mean arguments to prove it, and they themselves believed it only fid domidiater, as Minutus Felix expresses it, with a divided faith. They did, as it were, but half believed it, and as for the resurrection of the body, that was denied by Tertullian, says, by every sect of the philosophers, and in what a low manner do they represent the happiness of the future state, by walking in pleasant fields, by sitting under fragrant orders or bowers, and cooling shades, and by shelter from inclement weather, by viewing flowing fountains, and purling and babbling streams, by carnal myth, feasting, music and dancing, and the misery of it, by being bound neck and heels together, or in a chain, or fastened to a rock, whipped by furies, with a scourging of serpents, or doomed to some laborious service. But not the least hint is given of the presence of God with the one, or of his absence from the other, nor of any sensations of his love or wrath. Let us therefore bless God that we have a better rule and guide to go by, a more sure word of prophecy to take heed unto. Let us have consistent recourse unto it, as the standard of faith and practice, and try every doctrine and practice by it, and believe and act as that directs us, and fetch everything from it that may be for our good and the glory of God. End of chapter.